Greetings everyone. Going to be doing a quick video here on how to dominate your next multiple choice test. The way that we look at it is by analyzing the multiple choice itself, the question itself. It's a very common sort of test and it can really only do so much. It's just an excellent way of testing a lot of information and a lot of people quickly. So we're just going to go through and just have a look at the question itself and then the strategies we can use before and during the exam itself to really do well. First we need to analyze the question itself. We typically have some sort of call to action, which we're going to be calling the stem, or the question itself. Sometimes there's a question mark. Here you can see there is no question mark, so there's some sort of call to action. Then we're going to break down these stems. We want to first identify what is the question asking me to do. We want to really read that carefully. The next part we want to be able to do is we want to identify the root part of that stem. Which parts are relevant, which parts are irrelevant. You can think of these just as the facts or the keywords or other information that's not as useful or maybe just be irrelevant. It's just filler. So we're going to be looking at how we can deal with that as well. Finding out the facts of the question and also finding out if they're relevant or irrelevant. And then what we can do to deal with that. Next we have the set of answers. In the answers you'll typically have a distractor where the professor is trying to give you a plausible answer that could fit, but it's not the best answer. So it could distract you if you have misinterpreted something up here in the stem, or you're taking one of the irrelevant facts. It could give you that this is the best answer when in actual fact it's not. The next part is the next type of answer they have when they give you multiple choice tests is called the foil. Now the foil is when it plays off against another answer. So you have two answers that look very similar. You can see here that we have almost three foils here, A, C, and D. They've all got some form of socialization in their terms, so they all look related in some way. Now they're just asking you to differentiate the three of them. Which one is the best answer in this case? So now that we've got our parts, how do we deal with identifying the question, dealing with relevant or irrelevant facts, and how do we eliminate these foils, or eliminate distractors first of all, and then try and choose the best answer, the most appropriate answer when we're dealing with foils? Can we first identify these things, and then what can we do to deal with them? Before we do that, we need to be able to help us identify that stem or the question, what it's asking us. Before we do that, we want to be able to identify the type of question that we're actually answering. So here we're going to come up with 3 or 4 different ways of identifying and classifying these multiple choice questions. The first one is just going to be called a recall question. So it's going to be asking about basic facts, names, or definitions. This is just going to be basic recall. Do you know the term? Can you define the term in either the way that your professor done it in class or a textbook sort of definition as well? So it's just basic factual knowledge. You're going to recognize it. If you know it, then you know it. So it's really just basic recall, recognition, familiarity. The next one is a bit more in depth. This one here is a bit more of an application question or conceptual question. These ones here will involve something very specific to with context-specific knowledge. You may have to apply this knowledge. It's going to require more than just memorizing it. You're going to have to, in this case, the typical question for this would be a professor gives you an example and then gives you 4 different terms that you need to match there. Can you match this example, this new scenario, to this particular concept? So really saying if you can label a new concept. Or they'll give you the concept and they'll give you 4 different examples and you have to pick which example defines that. So we have to, not only do we need to know the definition of the term, but we also have to be able to label and apply that term to a new scenario or a new example that we haven't seen before. So ask for just a little bit more than memorization. Then there's the combination questions. These are questions that have all of the above, none of the above, or other questions that involve 1 and 2 only, or B and C and D only. That type of question where we have to join three of the answers might be correct and one of them is actually false. How do we deal with those? Those ones there require a lot of thinking and take up a lot of our time just on the actual structure of it. That's the 3 that we want to be able to label. Those are the 3 types that we want to identify. We want to be able to identify if it's going to be a recall question, if it's going to be an application or an analysis question, or if it's going to be a problem-solving combination question. Combination question, where it asks us to combine 2 or more answers together. Preparing for the multiple choice exams, we've already gone through. You can check out the other videos for preparing for them. Hopefully you're using the COST method, or you're using PyTap, or you're doing test appropriate practice. Just as a structure of some of the strategies that we've used before, when we're preparing for a multiple choice test, we really just want to be focusing around down here. This will help us to really drill down and help us to compare and contrast and prepare for looking at multiple answers, while also understanding our terms itself and examples of each of those. Check out the other videos for preparing strategies. These ones here are strategies for the test itself. So let's have a look. In our full 2-hour workshop, we go through most of these. I'm going to go through some of these. So let's dive into it pretty quickly here. Number one, we want to read the instructions. Really just making sure that we're following all the instructions. Do you have choices in how you answer? How's it going to be marked? You can ask the proctor for ask them questions to clear up anything that you're unsure of. They'll be able to tell you whatever they can. If they don't, then there's no harm in that. You won't be penalized. So don't be afraid to ask questions if you're not sure. Read the instructions. There can be lots of information in here, and it's a very simple way to start. Planning our time. This here, hopefully, most of our professors in their syllabus, they'll give you some structure, or they'll have a part of a lecture, maybe 5-10 minutes, where they actually describe what the actual midterm will look like, midterm or final. So it could be 50 questions in 50 minutes is the common one for a midterm. You could have 100 questions in 2 hours, sort of thing. So just figure out a method of planning your time. You can do it based on an average, and just give yourself 1 minute per question, or if it's going to be 1.5 minutes per question. Then what we want to be able to do is, another way to plan it actually, is to say, okay, I've got to be halfway. When it's halfway, it's an hour from now, I've got to be at question 50 in an hour, that sort of thing, and just keeping track of your time. Sometimes professors will put up a large clock in the classroom, or you'll just have to be managing off of a small clock or a timer that you have yourself. Focusing on doing 80% of the test well is an excellent strategy. We know that there's going to be some questions in there that are going to be really difficult and that I can't answer, so we just want to go through and just filter those. Go through and divide your questions into easy, medium, and hard. There's going to be some questions that you can answer immediately. Find out some of those. Go through and look for those recall questions, and then start again and keep filtering through, and then do the medium questions. And every time you do one of those recall questions that you know the answer to, and you get done quickly, you're saving that time. If you've found that you've got an average of 1 minute per question, and you're taking 15 seconds to do a question, you're saving 45 seconds. So you can add that 45 seconds. If you go through and find the 10 questions that you have there, you're finding yourself a bunch of minutes that you can then add on and spend a little bit more time on the more difficult questions. So we really want to be skipping out those 20 questions that we know are going to be really hard and leaving those to the very end. The last thing we want to have is that experience where we get stuck on one of those hard questions. We come across one of those 20% questions, we sit there and we spend 5-10 minutes and we get an answer, but we spent so much time that now we've got to actually start using our guessing strategies for the last 10 questions left in the test. And that's now we're guessing and we're not giving our best effort, where there's some of those questions we probably could have done much better had we just skipped and come back to it. Answering the questions in order, starting at the start and going all the way to the end. So if you apply that filter rule, just say, I'm going to do all the easy questions. So go through and do all the easy ones, and then go through and just keep skipping and starting and going back, and just keep going from the start to the finish. Don't go through looking for good questions. We just want to go through with the mindset, I'm going to do 80% really well. Let's go through and do the easy ones, and then start again. Now I'm going to do the medium ones. Now I'm going to have time for the medium hard ones. Just trying to save time and get through every time we go through, filter through. Identifying keywords in the stem. Again, this is something that you probably already do. We want to be underlining and we want to be circling. This here is going to be helping us to really drill in on those relevant facts and those irrelevant facts. That's really rooting out what we're supposed to be focusing on and helping focus our reading. It also has the advantage of activating our memory recall of it. So it might trigger some memory. We're saying, hey, focus on this particular term. This is definitely a key term. So as we're also underlining, and circling, we also want to be crossing out. So if you find that there's relevant information, highlight it. If there's irrelevant information, you can feel that you can cross it off as well. one thing that we can really notice about is absolute and relative terms. This changes the meaning quite dramatically when we think about it. Specifically, when we look at absolute terms, we can think can you think of any single example that contradicts or disproves that statement? We have a list of the terms here. You can go through. Is there any chance that if we say all of this happens, or it's every single circumstance, is that true? Can you think of one circumstance during lecture or during your textbook readings that's not true? And then we can really rule out that answer. Having a look at negatives, really helping ourselves to identify the key terms, go through, compare and contrast anything that doesn't belong, and if we're having negatives, reword them is one really helpful way. If we can notice that as we're going through and noticing our negatives, we can really cancel out any double negatives as well. Assuming nothing and trying to use our common sense is easy to say. It's hard to do given the raised stress levels that we'll have during it. But don't add anything extra on. This is typically when we're coming with the foil. When we're trying to play across two answers that look very similar, it's quite difficult to separate the two of them. So really only focus. Both of them could be the suitable answers, but we're trying to find the one that's best in this given circumstance. Don't try and bring in, well, if this was the case, or if that was the case, then B would be the answer, or no, if this was the case, then C would be. We have to deal with only what we're given. Using true-false with combination questions is incredibly powerful. It's going to save us so much time. Jumping straight to a question of it, I want to show. Here's the scenario. We'll have our stem. We've underlined some key terms in here. So we'll have 1, 2, and 3, which will be the answer. This is our type of combination questions. And then it will give us 1 only, 2 only, 1 and 2 only, 1 and 3 only. We don't even want to look at this yet. It's very hard for us in our short-term working memory to hold on to this information. We can't jumble all these around. So very quickly, we just want to go through these three options, and then we just want to read them with the stem and then just say if it's true or false. So if we can just say, oh yes, in this scenario that's true, in this scenario yes that's true, and in this scenario that's false. If we can just go through and just focus on our options and then come down and look at our actual answers, that way we're going to be saving a lot more time. It's much easier for me to say, okay, 2 trues and 1 false, which one fits that? Focusing on reading the stem with the options and then just using true, false, that will really get us through and help us to save a bunch of time. We've already mentioned this one as well. We want to cross out or eliminate any irrelevant information as well. Covering up is maybe one of our best answers. If we're prepared well, we want to cover up those answers and see if we can answer the question on its own. If I know the answer, then I can check to see if my answer is there. I've eliminated the foil, and I've eliminated the use of the distractor as well. If I cover up the distractors, if I cover up the foils, then I can try and come up with the answer on my own, and then I can go through each one and come up with a best answer. If my answer is there, I can feel confident that I've got the right one. Really helpful. It doesn't work in every single case, but it can. It does help to focus us ourselves. Again, this is a good example. Just saying, if you get a full question, do you know the answer? Can you recall the answer? And then see if your answer is there. Bingo, you can move on. Identifying the 2 similar choices. This is when we're trying to cope with the foil. This is one of the last ones we'll stop at here. What we mentioned before is that it's 2 answers and they're playing off of each other. They're very, very similar. So what we want to do, one strategy is just to restate both choices in your own words. If you can restate it, no, B is the answer because of blah, 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 blah. And no, C is the answer because of this and that. If we can do that, then it's much easier. If we've tried the cover up method, we might already have come up with an answer. So use that one first. Restate the answer, and then if we're still having trouble when we're restating the answer or assuming too much, what we can do is we can examine how they're different. We've been saying they're too similar, they're too much alike. What we want to do is we want to create some separation, and the way to do that is just to compare and contrast them and find out any differences. We've already been focusing on the similarities in our thinking. How can we find out the differences? That's the last response that I wanted to talk about with multiple choice. Watch this video again to really go through them. And good luck on your next multiple choice exam. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.